in getting services. Sometimes they're very difficult to find, to get. In my personal experience, I called CMH. I live in Michigan, and once you get into services in Michigan, they're really good. They're really helpful. It's just getting into them that's difficult, and that might be in every state. So what I had to do was I had to start going around. I had to call the Developmental Disability Council. Every state should have one. They told me what waivers to ask for. Every state has a parent training information center that you can utilize, and oftentimes these agencies work in conjunction with, in Michigan, it's community mental health, whatever agency provides your waiver services. These agencies that I'm telling you about are national agencies, and they will know who you should contact. The local disability network, it's been mentioned a lot. I use the resource. Your local ARC is always a great resource. So once you get the number, you're going to call your local mental health agency, and you're going to get assigned a case manager. That case manager is your gateway to services. So when I first started getting case management, we were through an agency, and my case manager was one that taught me how to run services. My kids are now on the self-determination program, but at the time, the case manager taught me everything that I needed to know to have my kids have a full life and a productive life and live in their own home. So agencies are really beneficial to start out with. And another thing I want to make clear is there's no wrong choice for you guys. If you don't choose self-determination, that's fine. If you choose a group home, if you choose a supported living situation, whatever is right for your family is the right answer. Once you get into CMH services, you would have choices between community living supports, the rehabilitation support waiver, or respite. And in Michigan, we have all three. You also have choices to think about, like, do you want the supports in their parents' home? Do you want them to live in their own home? Or do you want them to live in a group home, or now supported living situations where you have roommates? So there's a lot of choices there. Your last choice, well, not your last choice, but another choice you have to make is if you want an agency model or a self-determination model. The self-determination model requires a little bit of training, and some states call it consumer-directed services. I don't know if consumer-directed services require more work if you place your child in a group home, but I can tell you from personal experience that if it's not a part-time job, it's a full-time job. So there are some ins and outs to that you probably need to know. So that's my overview of services.
Thanks, Timothy and Todd. We are all parents. And if we didn't all introduce ourselves, my name is Pat Hornbecker. I'm from San Francisco, California, and I have been working with the ARC of San Francisco for most of my son's life. My son is the oldest of my 4 children. He has Angelman syndrome. He is 39 years old, and I have 3 daughters, 35, 28, and 26, I think. I have worked with the ARC of San Francisco, the ARC of California, and the ARC of the United States for most of the last 35 years to be the guiding force for services for my son. Because he's 39, there was no Angelman syndrome then. So he was a kid with no label going through the school system in San Francisco, which was fine with me because then I designed the entire program and they couldn't argue with me that he didn't fit in a nice little box for Down syndrome kids or kids with autism or kids with whatever. That was kind of how I started in an infant program getting into the school system and was introduced to the ARC as probably a service agency that only provided services to adults, but they connected me to local agencies that provided services, advocacy services to family members of kids in school. So that was my original connection. And in California, we have the Lanterman Act, which is an entitlement law that is the only state that has one. But as a result, every person in California is entitled to services. And so those of you from California have a case manager at your regional center. They know what services you're eligible for. Now, just like school systems, they don't always tell you what all the services are because they are going to have to pay for them. My son is a waiver kid, and they didn't tell me until he was 18 years old. Well, that's because those waiver funds don't kick in till you become an adult at age 18. And then I realized that, so now he makes his own decisions, which they often will tell you when you're in the school system too. All of a sudden your son or daughter turns 18 and they say, well, by the way, we're not inviting you to the IEP anymore. And they go, what? And he said, well, he's an adult. He can sign his own IEP. And I went, have you met my son? And I'm not being sarcastic or flip, but all of us know we talk about self-determined services, we talk about conservatorships and guardianships, and we talk about supported decision-making, and we know what that means. We talk about assistive technology. There's a whole track of communication going on down around the corner about assistive technology for communication. We know as family members of people with Angelman syndrome that is a very, very slippery slope. And if you do not manage it well, you will find that the agency is making the decision, not the individual with Angelman syndrome, and not you. So in the school system, I learned very early on that all you have to do is, if they're going to accept your son's signature on an IEP, they're also going to accept it on a letter that says, to whom it may concern, my mother will represent me for all educational and service programs for the rest of his life. Period. And they said, what? I said, well, that's what he wrote. If you signed that IEP, you were going to enforce that. And and in California, we have an IPP, which is the next level. It's the Adult Service Program. And so we have an individual program plan, IPP, which is just like you've been writing IEPs for your entire life. And what happens then is they have to accept that same signature. Now in other states, though, you might have some kickback. And so as Kathy's map that she was going through takes you through the school system and you move into the adult world, you start talking about guardianships and powers of attorney and the individual making their own decisions. And those are very tricky ways of doing it, but it is manageable. I had Joseph conserved. And conserved, I think you call it guardianship here in Kentucky. And some people think that I have violated all of his rights by taking them away, because he no longer can make the decisions that he would make all by himself. Well, if he was left to make all of his decisions all by himself, that would be a very interesting picture, and any of the parents in this room know what that means. So I had him conserved at 21, or before he became 21 years old, so that I knew he could live independently, but that the service agencies that were going to have to work with him or he was going to have to engage with, were going to do what was necessary for him to have a quality life living in California. Because when you get out of the school system, you're jumping into a whole new world, a whole new set of language, and a new set of agencies. I mean, not like the school system wasn't trouble enough for 22 years. But now you're dealing with Social Security, you're dealing with, you're making a transition from pediatric to adult medical care. My son was with his pediatrician until she was 20 years old. She sat down with me and she goes, Pat, I have something to tell you. I'm retiring. Oh, thank God, I doesn't tell you we were breaking up anyway. And she goes, what? And I said, well, I found a colleague of yours that will provide adult services as an internist to Joseph at UCSF, and that's usually a good place to go as a university. And she provides services to all people with IDD in her practice. And so I broke up with our pediatrician, and it was, if any of us know what that is, it's a very big thing. I cried. We cried, and we had a drink. But anyway, what was really, these are the other agencies that you're having to work with. So the Medicaid issues, how you're going to get your medical care. Joseph was living, Social Security. So Social Security, of course, before 18, they said he was not disabled enough. Really? Or I made too much money. I said, yeah, right. It's like discretionary funds or something they talk about. I have no idea what discretionary funds are. Or disposable income. I love that when they ask you that. There is no such thing. For in-home support services, while he was living at home with me, he was eligible for in-home support services, but it was a pretty nominal amount. I think he only got 60 hours a month. And when he moved out of my house, he got 283 hours. So that's in-home support services. He gets the max because he's under protective supervision. Protective supervision means that if you left him alone, he would probably not survive by himself. He would not necessarily stay in the building. He might turn on the stove. He might be a danger to himself or others. Okay. So in California, they pay in-home support service personnel $16.50 an hour. So that's a lot of money, actually, when you need to hire somebody to work for your son or daughter. For housing, we were looking at different housing options. Housing is working with the public housing authorities. It's working with the ARC, who also might be working with agencies to build housing for people with disabilities. Group homes. In California, we're closing all of our institutions by the end of next year. So anyone living in the institutions or any facility over 17, they are moving out into the community. So you go back to the ARC and the money follows the person, and those people who are moving out of the institution, that money that is used to support them is going to move out into the community with them. When I was advocating for housing for Joseph, I do remember threatening my case manager, and I said, well, you are not going to find me any housing, so I think I'm going to put Joseph in an institution in Sonoma. That was the state hospital. And I said, I'm going to park myself right outside. I'm going to move him in, and he's going to stay there for 30 days, and I'm going to be, camped out in a tent. And then when he moves, the money has to follow the person. Well, the person in the institution is getting $250,000 a month, to be supported in those institutions. That's how expensive it was, and I think Brandon was talking about that earlier, as was the woman from CAP. It's very expensive to live in these institutions, but then I could make the money follow the person. They didn't think that was a really good idea, so they looked a little harder for housing. The ARC of San Francisco ended up building a 9-apartment building, and it's right down on Fisherman's Wharf. He lives in a 2-bedroom apartment with a personal care attendant who lives in the other bedroom, and he has 24/7 support. And that all has to be managed by someone. It could be me, if we went self-determination. I do have an individualized budget for Joseph in California. His budget's about $100,000 a year. And that $100,000 is worthy of all the services that he has that wrap around. And I'm pretty old school here, so I did produce this little map because I go to these conferences all the time and people put their PowerPoints up and I want to write on them, and you never have them. So the little map I made is Joseph in the middle and my cute little heart. This is a Computer Knowledge 101. But as you can see, we're trying to, I had to make these choices with Joseph about his life once he turned 21. He moved into his apartment 3 months before his 21st birthday. He's lived there for almost 19 years. And he has a great life. But in doing that, I had to coordinate the in-home support service people. and hire those staff. I make sure that any of the in-home sports staff, and I think my numbers were on, it says $16 an hour. It was $16, it's going up to $16.50 this month. I have to coordinate the staff that Joseph hires, and by the way, he fires all women, because he moved out, being a woman. I thought nobody's going to be able to take care of my son like I can, so we hired women, and he fired them all. And they said, well, how do you know he's firing them? And I said, he's firing them because he's acting out. He says he doesn't want them. He definitely did not want them doing any personal care. And that's what we ended up determining when we were asking Joseph. And again, this is through my interpretation, working with Joseph and facilitating his communication and his understanding of his life. I am not making these decisions for him. I am not superseding, taking his rights away. So he hired men that worked around him, and they were all his age-ish. He was 20, so these are college students, 20s and 30s. Guys that wanted to work with, and they were totally untrained. Off the street, just interested in working with people with disabilities, and I went, well, I'm going to keep you. So we trained them. I also had them bonded through the ARC of San Francisco, so that they could also cross-train, CPR training, the fingerprinting, and all the other stuff that you have to go through. But if anyone doesn't show up on one shift, yet someone can take over, so the overnight person can cover. And so that was a complicated system to negotiate, but it was doable. We're going to talk about training and hiring of staff later with Kathy, but I won't go on with that. The San Francisco Unified School District was the training, he was in the transition program. You're supposed to write that into your IEP after about 16. A lot of people don't do it till 18. I think it's actually mandated at 14, but every state's a little bit different. But Joseph, when he moved out of my house, was still in that transition program. So the only thing different about Joseph's day when he moved out of my home was his evening. Because he still got picked up by the little yellow bus. He went to his transition program, which was a job out in the city. He worked in Golgate Park, and he had a couple of other job training experiences that were going on during that time. But then when he finished his day, he went home to his apartment in San Francisco. And that was traumatizing for me, that it worked, and it was a very smooth transition because a lot of his day was still the same. Then I had to make some choices after he got out of school to look at integrated work programs and supported employment programs. And these are, the back of this form also has what the boxes mean, by the way, because I'm probably using acronyms that are familiar to none of you or some of you. But supported employment. Supported employment is a program that is funded by the Department of Rehab and the waiver. And I used that through the ARC San Francisco to find out if that works. Supported employment was a goal of mine. I'll have to be true confessions. I thought I wanted him to be working in a law firm, delivering the mail, or cleaning the coffee rooms, or something like that. And that was what I had witnessed a lot of people doing. I said, let's see if Joseph can do that. Yeah, well, first of all, he doesn't read, so he wasn't delivering mail. And cleaning, actually he did do some coffee rooms at one point, but he never ended up staying at supported employment because he made too much money, and it was really hard to manage the money that he got, and then his SSI. And he also has the attention span of a flea. I don't know if anybody understands that, but that is usually what I explain to anyone when I say, okay, well, how long is this job going to take? And they said, well, it's about a 3-hour job. Yeah. Okay, so we did try some of them. He was on a graffiti patrol for a while, which was more of an integrated work program. That says 1-to-1. That's just because Joseph requires 1-to-1 and has had a 1-to-1 aid through the school system since age 5th grade. And it was fully included through high school and middle school. And the integrated work program was more of a group work. And we had a program from the ARC San Francisco that he would go out and remove graffiti by painting over it. So we didn't have to paint within the lines, thank God. And he loved, more than anything, he loved the jumpsuit and the reflective vest he got to wear. He just thought it was the coolest thing in the world. Didn't like the painting so much, but he pushed that cart for miles. So some of the other guys did the painting. Sometimes he did the painting, but it wasn't the greatest thing in the world. He's done that. He did the unhanging of clothes at Nordstrom, because they take these clothes and they put them and they're going to ship them off somewhere else, and they're all with hangers. I mean, whoever taught those people not to hang things up? But they needed somebody to find the hangers in the clothes, so he's unhanging the clothes. I thought that was a great job. He worked at a food bank, and these programs were actually more of a meaningful volunteerism, and you really have to worry about volunteerism, because sometimes volunteerism is tokenism, and it's not really something you want anybody doing. And you certainly don't, cleaning up litter on the side of the freeway, those kind of things. But he was working in a food bank, and he wasn't getting paid for it at all, but he enjoyed it because he was passing out cans of food and filling the boxes for people coming through a line. He had a one-to-one assistant doing that with him, but he was with regular folks sitting in the community doing this. He was with regular people unhanging the clothes also. Those were really cool experiences for him, but again, because he has the attention span of a flea, they have rotated in and out of his life for all of these years. Supported living services and the independent living services were two things that we were looking at. I think I wanted independent living services, which means that somebody kind of just comes in and if you have an individual who needs less support, they can come in and check to make sure you've done some shopping, there's food in the refrigerator, make sure you paid your bills, make sure, and you're doing a little bit more just supervising from afar. It would be a lot of the technology can do that also with that Brandon was talking about. Those are independent living skills, services. The supported living services is what Joseph has, which again is 24/7. He has somebody that comes in from 8:30 to about 2:30, depending on how long or late he sleeps. And to the 8:30 to 2:30, one-to-one, they're going out into the community doing a variety of things when he's not doing the jobs that are for an attention span of a flea. But he's out, he belongs to the library and all the museums and the aquarium and any and all of the programs that are available in San Francisco. And he loves writing the cable cards and munis. He prefers that to my car, as a matter of fact. But he is out in the community, hanging out at his local Starbucks, going to his regular groups of friends, totally with his one-to-one aid, and doing whatever he chooses to do. They have a means of communicating with him on how to determine what we're going to do today, what music we're going to see or hear. I have found that most of the people he hires are very creative, artistic, musical people. The best guy I ever hired was a skateboarder. And this dude was so cool, and he still comes back and forth to see Joseph every now and then, but he just looked at the world differently, and he looked at the world very much like Joseph did. And I've never just seen them just jive so well. It was quite a wonderful relationship to watch bloom, and that was probably one of my best experiences with him. Then, of course, we had Social Security. So I already mentioned that Social Security came through, and they said that, oh, now he's eligible once he turned 18. And oh, miracles. He's getting about $790 a month, and that's what he's living on. Now, I mentioned he lives in an apartment, and that's where we get to housing. It's HUD housing, Section 811 housing. And later this afternoon, someone from the Arc of the United States will be speaking about housing, how to get it, where it is. In San Francisco, what we did is we went to the mayor's office. And the Arc of San Francisco went to the mayor's office. Almost every city has a consolidation plan, which is a housing plan that they have to have. And that's just one of the rules. And they've got to have a plan, and in that plan, you must have a certain amount of people, housing for people with disabilities, and aging, and low income. And California, at the time, Mayor Willie Brown was the mayor, they did not have any people with disabilities included at all. And it was, we said, well, gotcha. So they had to rewrite their plan, and they did incorporate housing for people with disabilities. We tore down a fish market with the city of San Francisco, and we raised $3.5 million and built an apartment building. We applied for Section 8 housing, and they said no. And then after we built the housing, HUD came down and said, oh, we're going to give you Section 811 voucher for this, or no, it's not a voucher. Section 811, you are now deemed Section 811, which meant that Joseph could live there and only have to pay, well, Joseph actually wasn't on the list at the time, but Joseph could live in this apartment. Anyone who lived there did not have to pay more than 1/3 of their Social Security income. And that because of the level of need, his protective supervision determined by IHSS, he also could have a full-time attendant living in the apartment for free. So Joseph's so this is how I get people to work for Joseph. By the way, you get an apartment in San Francisco at Fisherman's Wharf, and you don't have to pay. And they go, oh, that's pretty cool. But by the way, you have to take care of my son. So that's a whole hiring fire we'll get into later. But so Joseph pays $232 a month to live at Fisherman's Wharf in a 2-bedroom apartment. And the rest of his money is his to do as he chooses. And again, I said that I had him conserved when he was 21 years old. I also started a special needs trust at that point, which was just empty. I mean, it's really just a shell, so that when I die and he inherits my millions, or I inherit any money, I can pass it on to him. Now, the ABLE account has just come through, and that wasn't there 20 years ago. But the ABLE account is an opportunity for people with disabilities to save money. It's like a college fund, like the 529s that you could do for the rest of your college kids. And you could save money without having it show up on his records as income that will be repossessed for his Medicaid services, because you can't have more than $2,000 that's available to him. So the special needs trust, any money that goes into that is not accessible to him. What's the advantage of having an ABLE account is that he has access to it, but legally there's enough of a legal line that Medicaid's not going to, CMS, they're not going to come back and swoop away his money. That's good. Because part of the reason I had him conserved, part of the reason I had a special needs trust, and as I tell Joseph's team of 7 or so all the time, I'm going to die. And they go, all right. And I said, that may be wishful thinking on your part, but no. But the point is, I am going to die. And I don't trust these agencies to do this map, and manage this without me. I need people, and therefore my special needs trust, my living will, is all set up so that there are people that will take over for me to facilitate Joseph's language, to make Joseph's, help him make the decisions he needs to make. When we sat at the regional center office in San Francisco, and we were asking the Golden Gate Regional Center, whose job, by virtue of being a regional center, there's 21 regional centers in California, and their job is to advocate for the 230,000 people with developmental disabilities in California. So they have to say no to my guardianship, conservatorship request. And so there's well, you know, it's our job, we can't do this, okay. And we sat in this meeting for 2 hours, writing his IPP, and going over the issues of conserving him. And the woman, they had a doctor and a psychiatrist and all these people in here. And at the end of the meeting, they said, well, you know, we're going to have to say no. And I said, I want to go on the record because it was being recorded. I just want to go on the record that we sat here for 2 hours and not one of you asked Joseph one question. You didn't ask him if he agreed with this. You didn't ask him if he understood why he was here. You didn't ask him anything. I said, boom, you're done. I said, no judge is going to go with you. And they did. And so that is why I do what I do, tell my story, tell Joseph's story, but that is why there's someone else behind me who's going to help manage all of these services. Because it's not simple. The school system was a piece of cake compared to this. Piece of cake. And so as your kids are aging, and you are aging, I mean, I'm looking at Medicare myself. I'm looking at retirement. How many of you families, when somebody says you're retired, you just go, yeah, that's somebody else's dream? I have no idea how I'm ever going to do that. Because I know too many families that have kids with disabilities.